For this session of more or less half an hour, we will have a feedback from the questionnaire you received, all members. And my two colleagues will make this exercise. Erika Trabucco, just close to me, she's an architect for more than 10 years, with 2 years in the field with Handicap International, Humanity and Inclusion. And she's now based in Lyon, and she's working on the accessibility and especially organizing also this event. So I think we can congratulate Erika for this job. And Barbara is also from the headquarters of HI. And she has 10 years in the higher education domain as a human formation specialist in human formation pedagogical director. And she joined Handicap International 2 years ago. So I invite you to make this exercise of feedback.
Hello. So thank you for staying here with us, because we have some interesting information to share with you today. When we were preparing this event, we were looking for international structured data about the inclusion of disabled students to introduce the day, and we found that there was not. So we decided to create a simple questionnaire that we sent to everybody. So that means 300 sent questionnaires. And we wanted to know better to what extent you were already receiving disabled students and staff in your structures, how you addressed this specific task, what were your main challenges, your successes, and finally, what you expected from participation in an international network. So we're glad to share the results with you today. And thanks to all of you who have taken time to respond, to reply to this questionnaire. Indeed, we received some very interesting answers and sometimes very detailed. I'm sorry we won't have time to share everything with you today, it's too long, but be assured that all of this data will be given and sent to a head, which will work on it and go further for expectation. So, last Friday, we had collected 28 answers. 20 answers from a marketing point of view is not so bad, because it's a 10% response rate. But it's clearly impossible to draw on any scientific approved survey from such a small number, and we're really aware about that. So one answer per country cannot represent the reality of a local situation. And other biases is that the person who has answered the questionnaire has clearly one role and one experience, which is not the same as the other persons in his institution. So we know that it's not perfect. But anyways, the answer came from 19 countries located in various parts of the world. And it has been possible to collect insight and trends, which will draw a quick qualitative sketching of the situation. We had 19 universities and grad schools, 6 specialized institutes and centers, and 1 national university-related project. And thus, my first conclusion is that a large, scientifically driven survey would undoubtedly be of great value for all of us. So please, let's send it next year with a head on the GUDIN project. It will be very interesting. So next slide, thank you. The first 3 questions were about the number and proportion of disabled students, staff, and faculty members with disabilities enrolled in your structures. For the students, the numbers vary from 2 to 3,000. That is from less than 1% to 10% of the student population. As for the staff and faculty members, we got several zeros. So generally speaking, it appeared that the staff topic was less widely addressed, which seems understandable because, and we'll see this in a minute, higher education structures start by concentrating that energy on welcoming disabled students. And sometimes they struggle to be able to enlarge their target. But they also seem to have difficulties in creating a positive awareness climate about inclusion in the structures. And this could maybe enhanced if more staff and faculty members with disabilities were enrolled in the organization. Another really important comment was made, which I want to draw your attention on. Some structures were simply unable to answer those questions. And indeed, it's really difficult to collect data about disabilities because of the non-discrimination laws that forbid to simply ask the question. The structures then have to rely on self-disclosure and facilitate it. So the given numbers are to be questioned. We know that for various reasons, some people do not wish to be identified, that in some cases, the answers were given by sight, which means that only clearly visible impairments would be counted, and which also raises the nature of the tracked impairments. For example, structures told us that they only had students with dyslexia, or with other forms of disability which can't be seen. So I do hope that we will have the chance to discuss the topic together, because it's really an important one. In question 4, we turn to the need to have an internal policy about inclusion. And it clearly appeared that nearly all institutions think important to have one. 2/3 of the panel said that they have such a policy, whether a specific one or including it in global non-discrimination plans or statements. Except for one no. The remaining third do not have any for the moment, but they think it's really important to have one in the next future. And one answer did precise that after having implemented this policy, it has taken a year or 2 to put in place a committee to really implement it. So the policy is not enough, of course. On this next slide, we can see that every structure having implemented a specific policy has also created a dedicated department. Those are the same ones I have verified. The small difference in numbers consists of 2 structures that have based their action on a national orientation law and not on their staff form. And in both cases, the most frequent amount of staff members is between 1 and 3 persons, usually. A quarter have dedicated staff members, but included in another service, such as human rights, student well-being, learning support, or student affairs. And without having any official policy, those have already put in place changes and new practices, for example, in order to enhance physical accessibility, which is the first topic addressed generally. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate. No? Okay. So the next part is about the successes, challenges, and objectives. We are happy to confirm that the answering structures have already achieved numerous successes. We have classified them into 3 categories: the improvement of the well-studying of disabled students, the improvement of the structure's inclusive organization, and the improvement of the inclusion awareness. In the first one, registration and welcoming of disabled students is from far the most frequently quoted successful field. And the process seems to take place through clearly identified steps. First, the existence of special registration forms or filling spaces in application forms for self-identification. Then, an assessment needs, generally through individual meetings with specialists, support to finding suitable accommodation, research of technical adaptations to answer the special needs. And here we can also speak about the creation of physical accessibility on the campus. But despite this, questions already arise at this step. And for example, how to clearly and legally identify the students with specific needs? Who should evaluate those needs and how? And how to evaluate the related costs? In the next step, studies and graduations, most often appear adaptation of exam conditions, more time, use of digital frameworks, oral or written exams, and vice versa. Specific trainings and workshops for mainstream staff. For example, about universal design. The providing of individual support is also underlined through the help of dedicated teams, but also in one case, by the creation of tandems with another student. And some institutions also mention the creation of a resource center technical adaptations such as braille corners in the public library, audio-video labs, or courses on sign languages. And a few organizations go so far as to accompany their students after graduation, with internships, finding career, helping them to find jobs, and in one case, providing them with specific equipment for their future. So in this first topic, we found 3 success indicators, which are the number of students with disabilities, doubled in 4 years, for example, the peace, confidence, and satisfaction of the disabled students, which is really important, and the third one, disabled students finishing their studies get appropriate work. In the second topic, we found 3 successes improving the structure's inclusive organization. First, the employment of staff with disabilities, which has been quoted only twice, which is coherent with our first remark. A slightly more unexpected success, evoked by several structures, is worth underlying. Working on cross-subject subject of inclusion has generated new, interesting, and valuable internal collaborations, and first of all, with students themselves. For example, one structure says, our university project of inclusion enabled the entire community, including mainstream and special educators, social workers, parents, and students to work together and participate in the design, delivery, and monitoring of education, which is really a great success. And last but not least, inclusive provided a better quality education for all students. The further field of successes is the improvement of the inclusion awareness, which can be internal and external. First, in the organization, among students, faculty, and staff, resulting in changing discriminatory attitudes. And second, external spreading, often by taking up the model to other universities, sign language support for other universities, or sometimes by launching research projects around the world. So what are the main challenges? We found 5 main problematics in those challenges. Here are the first 3 ones. The physical accessibility, so we don't have to speak about that further because we all know what the problem is, and we have spoken about that for such an amount of time. Pedagogical issues, but surprisingly enough, the few difficulties raised in the answers are extremely specific and technical. And finally, information problematics. The capacity to touch, to inform, and to encourage potential students to come to the university, and then to be able to know their needs as early as possible, even before their arrival, in order to better serve them. So that communication subject is quite important. But 2 others have been way more emphasized. First, the resources and funding issues. That is to say that structures struggle to find budget, to find assistance, and to find time. And here the quotations are clear, so I do not need to comment. You can read what has been said. We clearly see that people don't have time enough to address all the topics, or don't have money enough. And finally, the most frequently quoted challenges are attitudinal barriers. Those are faced by institutions to really be able to change things for disabled students and staff. First, a lack of openness on the subject can reach even resistance or stigma, which still exists in several countries, and especially in the South. And this lack of openness results from a negative vision of disability, which is still grounded on a medical and charity approach, comparing disabled students to so-called normal or classic ones, and therefore an incapacity to see them as added value of diversity. And this raises the last challenge, which is a need to get more involvement and support from all stakeholders. That is to say, first, the students themselves, the staff, and the political structures. So the next slide, and last one for me. I won't list all the objectives for the next 2 years, which have been quoted because there's a lot of them, which are all interesting. But they show that there's extreme willingness to go further, to improve, and to globally correspond to the challenges mentioned before. There are first the challenge, the technical issues, starting by having a really functional office, which means dedicated staff, which means money. The digitalization of resources in order to spread them more easily. The increasing of awareness. And then appears the last one, the willingness to enlarge partnerships with all possible actors.
Yes, and then another aspect, another objective for some of the institutions we've been in touch with is a political change, political meant in the sense of internal in the organization. One of the elements that were mentioned was the updating or creating of policies inside the university, updating for those who already have it, or the creation of policies for the universities, the institutions that don't have these policies yet. And this is fundamental, of course, because we will talk about that later, but if, as you already know, and someone was mentioning that already, if the leadership of the institution is not promoting inclusion, that would be difficult to be implemented in an effective way within the university or the institution itself. So this is recognized as one of the priority objectives. Some mentioned, again, accessibility, but especially in the sense of reasonable accommodation. So there was this strong idea of going to the students and ask for their personal needs. So not to do things in general for everyone, but to adapt to the specific needs of persons with disabilities involved in the university. And something that was interesting also, another objective was to create awareness, but create awareness not only inside the institution, but also outside, in the sense to do something that could attract students from the outside and make known that the institution was actually working towards inclusion, so that students with disabilities could know that they could go to that institution and receive support or be in an environment which is inclusive. Some other elements given as objectives is the idea of partnerships, and this is very good because we are here today for this exact reason. So the idea of collaborating with other institutions to exchange practices is very felt as an objective. Work together. So again, the idea to share what one institution know how to do with institutions that don't know is something that is felt very strongly as something that needs to be done. And some institutions also mentioned advocacy at the national level, which I think is very important, because it's very true that we need to work at the institution level, so university, grande école in France, whatever it is. But together, maybe we can also try to have an impact on the higher level of national societies and try to change things from there as well. There was, yeah, and this is all these answers are quite interesting, because Hervé, you can complete what I'm saying if I'm not exhaustive, but all these answers cover the 5 dimensions of inclusion. I don't know if you're familiar with this methodology. It's something that we've been working on a lot. We can say that inclusion is, we can work on inclusion addressing 5 main dimensions, as we call them, and you see them on my back. The important thing is that they are not separated, but they are all connected one to the other. So we can work on 1 dimension, 2 dimensions, or all together, depending on our capacity, the funding and human resources that we have. But all of them should be addressed at least in the first assessment of any actor or project or policy that we are working on, in order to have a more holistic approach to inclusion.
Erika, I just wonder if I can suggest a 6th area that I don't know if it fits neatly in one of the other 5, but something about disability studies and the academic mission of the university. It seems like universities that have a strong disability studies program often benefit from that in other ways, and it may be worth having kind of supporting the growth of disability studies as part of what we're trying to do in this network.
Sure. Hervé, if you want, you can respond. But actually, this is absolutely true, especially in the case of university academic institutions. Just let me say that this approach is valid for different kind of actors. It's not specific to one type, like a university, a business, or a service. It's very general. And normally it doesn't question the quality of the service, whatever it is, which is done. It's just a methodology that should allow us to make the service, the entity, more inclusive in the way he provides the service. But what you say is true, because talking about a university, of course, we should also talk about what is taught and how. But so very quickly we can start about inclusive policies. So what I was mentioning earlier, because inclusion should be an official objective of the institution, promoted through a framework formally adopted by the institution, and ideally made up of a policy, a strategy, an action plan, a budget plan, so everything that could make it real. This framework should aim at recognizing, promoting, and enforcing the rights of persons with disabilities, of course, within the institution, and it should be known by every member of the institution, widely disseminated and shared. So I mean, it doesn't have to be created and then put in a drawer. Everybody should be aware of the existence of this policy, of these instruments, these tools, and everybody should be able to have access to them, to know them, and to know what they entail. This process should also be driven by the leaders, as we were saying, of the institution. So should come from the top and then be spread and be promoted within the institution. And the leaders should be committed to actively work towards inclusion and to mobilize the resources and the dedicated time of staff needed to do so, because we need to be committed to inclusion, but this means also that we have to make some sacrifice in terms of what we want to mobilize to reach inclusion. The second one of the other elements is accessibility, of course, which is obviously a requisite for inclusion. And we're not talking, as you will know, only about accessibility of infrastructure, of the premises, in this case, universities, but we're talking about the equipment, which is inside and used by students and staff members and teachers, but also everything which is connected to communication. So the way communication within the university is produced, so the physical supports of communication, the way communication is given, the way we present things, the way we interact with our audiences, and so on. Pedagogical strategies as well, of course. Information technology, which is a huge way today to share information, especially in academical work. We have attitudes and we have internal culture, as you mentioned already. This is a crucial element because we need to change the way people interact with each other, so that the roots of the exchange between people could change in a sense of inclusion. And this actually, so fighting against stereotypes and promoting equal treatment for everyone. And this is probably the most cross-cutting between all these elements, but it's also the one that can help all the others, in the sense that if the attitudes change, we manage to make attitudes change towards inclusion, then maybe policies will be more easy to be modified, and other results could be easier to get to. It could like a snowball effect of positive impacts. Of course, there is the HR process and management, which is, as you will know, not only recruiting persons with disabilities, but it's making the whole global interaction between the structure and its staff members more inclusive in terms of course, recruitment, but also the contractualization, the management, the support to the students and to the staff, so the capacity development of the staff members. Everything should be done in a way that is inclusive and accessible for everybody. And the last thing is about partnership, because everybody recognizes that nobody is an island, and if we want to enhance our capacity to be more inclusive, we need to share, we need to connect with other institutes, similar or not. Academic institutions could connect with associations of students with disabilities, with other kind of associations to become more flexible, because being inclusive, it means also changing the way we function. So we should, an entity, an actor should be able to interact with the external so that they can change also the way they internally work to be more open and more flexible. Okay, sorry, finished.
Good, thank you. I can give the floor to you if you need to add a comment or maybe to ask a question. Feel free to. Yes.
Hi, thank you, Erika and Barbara, for doing all these data for us. One thing I noticed from the organization I work for is that there's such a parallel between businesses and higher education. The problems are the same. They're really exactly similar. Budget, time, leadership, lack of leadership support, anything related to the fact that they don't have a team. They're just like one or two people, if there is anybody taking care of that. It's really impressive. So actually, although it was mentioned that maybe higher education can support and lead change in the business sector, I wonder whether there is an opportunity for actually being influenced by the good practice from the business sector to take some of these good practices outside of the HE system, to be influenced and to influence the practices in the higher education sector.
Actually, I was thinking you were saying the opposite, that the business could be influenced by the...
That's what we said earlier, but actually there are also very good practices outside of the higher education, and businesses do now have that. So I wonder whether it's in both ways rather than just in one single way.
I suppose absolutely, because again, creating, hopefully this network will create opportunities also for universities to talk to each other and to connect, but also connect with businesses outside, because this is, as you were saying, is the next step of inclusion. We are here because we would like higher institutions to be more inclusive, so that afterwards students with disabilities have enough qualifications to access to qualified job opportunities. So there should be an interaction between these different entities, and I absolutely think that.
Yes, as the senator said, this is a management problem also, so we have to look how to other different companies tackle the subject. And tomorrow there will be in the day, in the summit, a special workshop which will work on that. So sure, there are some similarities, and we will work together to better address the subject.
Yes.
Thank you. Liz Sace from the London School of Economics. It seems to me that this is great data, thank you, and perhaps over time in the network we could share examples under each of those 5 star points of where things have worked well. In that spirit, I was just thinking, the issue of resources has come up a number of times. One thing we have in the UK is something called a Disabled Students Allowance, whereby the government will provide some funding. It's got more limited lately, but they will provide some funding if, for example, a student needs more than what would be considered a reasonable adjustment or accommodation. So perhaps the student needs a lot of sign language interpretation, or needs a personal assistant with them a lot of the time, more than the university is expected to or can resource. And we've got some data that shows that when that's in place, students are less likely to drop out of university, because students with disabilities are more likely to drop out generally. And I'd just be interested to know whether other countries have any arrangement like that. Ours is not at all perfect, and it's been cut back, but it seems to there's a germ of a good idea in it, I think. It's a sort of sharing of responsibility. The university has a lot of responsibility, but also the state can sometimes give some additional help if the cost is going to be great.
Yeah, Andy with AUCD, I just want to make a plea for HI not to be afraid to play a leadership role in this network over the long run. I recognize that AHEAD has agreed to play a leadership role, and we're about to hear from them, and I think that they have expertise that there's no question it's going to be valuable for the network, and they have capacity. But HI is a global organization with a lot of language capacity. You know how to do work in the global south in a way where you're not the ugly white people coming into the global south telling them what to do. And I feel like all of that is uniquely important as we set about doing this work. So you may not feel like you're experts in higher education, but you are experts in doing work globally with people with disabilities. And I feel like that expertise is going to be really important.
I'd like to answer regarding the fundings that disabled students can receive in France. I'm not aware of any scholarship or special funding. However, as long as they've declared officially themselves, anyone, student, person, as disabled, they have to go through lots of paperwork, and then a doctor has to evaluate their rate of disability. And in order to get special funding, you have to be declared 80% disabled. Less than that, you have no money, no nothing, no special car to park your car in the disabled parking space. So that's quite high, actually. Quite high, once again, probably because it's been cut back. But that's how it works here.
This is Raja here. Question for the Barbara and Erika here. Have you looked at, I saw the data, have you looked at this data from how many respondents have come from the south versus north? And if there is any qualitative and quantitative differences in the data and their responses towards inclusive higher education?
No, we have not, for two reasons. For the first one is that we have not sufficient answers. For 28 answers is really not scientific, so we can't drive any conclusion which is really mathematically approved. And second, it's quite hard to define which are the self and not the self, so we prefer not to at this stage. But certainly it will have to be done. I mean, it's really interesting and it lacks terribly. We have to go to have some information. We want to have some.
Another comment? No. Okay. Thank you very much, Barbara. And online, yes, we have no questions. Okay. So it's time now for the session concerning the future and what will be the step forward through the GUDIN. And I invite Stephen Smith to join us.